affiliated with both Hogue Faith Community Nursing and our UUMC Health Ministries team here. And I'm so glad that you're here. I want to make sure that you guys know that, oh my gosh, O'Connor's Mortuary is joining us today, and they have a table right outside. So if you did not get a chance to say hi to them on your way in, please do that on your way out. And a bit of housekeeping for any of you that are not familiar with our campus. If you need a restroom, just at the back of the sanctuary and to the right. And then there are also restrooms in the building over to this side in Williams Hall, if anybody's in need. And before I forget, we do have coffee and donuts and all kinds of other goodies, so if you didn't have a chance to partake of that when you first got here, please hang around for a few minutes afterwards, chat with each other, and enjoy a treat. We know that what we're doing today is a difficult topic. It's difficult for us to think about our own mortality, and sometimes it's even more difficult to think about the prospect of losing someone that we love and being left behind. So thank you for being willing to come and start that kind of a conversation. And I know our speaker today is going to walk us through this with both compassion and grace. So I wanted to share a little bit of a backstory about how we came to be here today. A couple years ago, Pastor Rick was nice enough to be on a Zoom meeting with our Hogue Faith Community Nurse team. I was so taken by the information that he shared. About the time that the whole thing was over, I was already online ordering his book. I read it immediately, and then when the workbook was available, I got it as well. And it ended up being really timely for us because my mom was in the last years of her life. So we actually used that as a guide to walk her through a little bit at a time, all those steps to make sure that we were able to honor her wishes. And when we think about this, we think a lot about a will or a trust, sometimes power of attorney, that sort of thing, but there are so many little details that we don't stop to think about. You know, things that were important to her. What kind of headstone did she want? Which mortuary did she want to use? What dress did she want to be buried in? And even before we got to that point, when was it time for palliative care? And when was it time for that transition to hospice? So a lot to think about, and it was a gift to us to have this kind of a guide. And she really gave us that gift of being willing to do that. And at this point, my husband and I are now trying to do that for our family so that we don't leave a mess behind for them. So before I get started, I just wanted to share a quote from Pastor Rick's book that really speaks to me and kind of has guided my motivation to be so passionate about this. So the quote is, "With a systematic approach in preparing for end of life, your survivors will inherit your plan instead of your problems, allowing them to grieve in a healthy way as your wishes are carried out." So with that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our speaker today. Rick Craig has been an ordained Christian pastor for 23 years. His calling into ministry actually started a little later in life at age 44 when he went back to school to earn his BA in Christian Leadership and Ministry from Vanguard University here in Southern California. Rick has been on staff at Coast Hills Community Church in Laguna Niguel and was an associate pastor and campus pastor at First Christian Church of Napa. His ministry has included premarital and marital counseling as well as grief counseling, and he's done work with Napa city and county chaplaincies. He's officiated more than 175 funerals and memorials in the Bay Area, and he's met with nearly 700 survivors for pre-funeral interviews and counseling. His expertise in ministry is also drawn from his personal experience of losing his brother, his wife, and his mother, all within an 18-month period of time. So in May of 2022, Pastor Rick was moved by the Lord to step down from pastoring and author the book When It's Time. And then in May of 2023, he published the accompanying workbook. He has, since publishing these, he's conducted webinars, seminars, trainings for hospice and hospital staff, and us as a community. Currently, Rick and his wife live in Northern California, and his son and daughter-in-law live in Georgia with their children, Isabella and Matthew. And with that, Pastor Rick, thank you so much for making your way down here to be with us today, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. It's great to be back, and I say back because in 1962, we moved to Orange County from Eastern Canada. And the area that you're sitting in right today and where you live around here is actually cattle ranch. Anybody remember that? We lived right across the street from Disneyland Hotel. We'd open up the apartment door, and less than 100 yards away was the golf course, the Disneyland Hotel. To the left was orange groves and strawberry fields and bean fields. That was our playground. And then you go into places like Midway City. It was all farmland between there and, and Huntington Beach. And we'd walk to school in Anaheim, and we'd go by the turkey ranches, and go. It was all farmland. I come down here now, and I need a GPS to get around. I have no idea where I'm going. So thank you for letting me be here. I appreciate it. Linda, thank you, and Pastor Kathy, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I want to tell you a little bit about myself, and Linda has shared, but a little bit more detail. So my brother was an Army veteran, and he died from Agent Orange exposure in Vietnam. And 1 year later, my wife passed away from metastatic breast cancer. 6 months later, as Linda said, my mother passed away. She was in rehab after back surgery, and medically they did some things that were just wrong. There we go. Okay. So I went through that, and I'm happy to tell you that I'm a grief survivor, and that is significant. And the reason that I'm a survivor from that and thriving is because I'm one of the few, and at that time the church I was at in Napa sent me to Colorado for 1 week for counseling. And it was at a facility started by an ordained Christian pastor, also psychologist, called Blessing Ranch. And I spent 40 hours with Dr. John, 40 hours, 1 week. And that was talking, writing, walking, exploring. Then I came back and I spent another 20 to 30 hours with Dr. Bill Mathis in Napa, who is a psychologist internationally known, works for CIA, FBI, different government agencies, been to Guantanamo Bay interviewing prisoners. So I spent another 20, 30 hours with him. So I had between probably 60 and 70 hours of grief counseling. So why do I tell you that? Because when my wife died, and I had friends say, would you ever get married again? I said, I don't want to ever go through that pain again, ever. But I also finished it by saying, it all depends what the Lord's going to do. So the Lord said, I have a plan for you, and I remarried. And Lauren is sitting right back there. And tell you a little bit about Lauren. She is from a different culture in the U.S. She's from Louisiana. Anybody heard of Cajuns? It's a wonderful culture, and what is interesting about that is being from Eastern Canada, my dad was in the Royal Navy based in Nova Scotia, where the Cajuns came from, in Newfoundland, so we went back there to take a tour of the maritime provinces and went to Nova Scotia, right where my dad was based. And the military base is still there, but it's used for public events. But we saw the birthplace of the Cajuns as they went south. So here's something that I think you could relate to if you know anything about Cajuns. So if you run over something in Louisiana, they say, go cook some rice. That's going to be your dinner. So marrying into a Cajun family, because I do most of the cooking at home, I had to learn how to cook Cajun food. So I did, and I make a pretty good gumbo. In fact, when Lauren's mother had the gumbo the first time, this is what she looked like when she was finished. So let me tell you a little bit about, I'll come over here this time, a little bit about the book. So Linda told you the history behind them. So I was at work, and I could sense that the Lord was doing something different in my life. And one of the way he speaks to me is makes me start to feel uncomfortable. Like, Lord, is this where I'm supposed to be? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Well, I put it out to the prayer team, which was 7 people around the country, and most of them had never met one another. And I said, would you pray about this? Because the Lord is doing something, but I don't know what it is. Well, the following day, a couple days later, I started to hear from everybody. They all had the same story. Step down, step away, rest, and then he'll show you what's next. Very conditional. It was also a test of faith. So if you follow the leading of the Lord, he's going to lead you where he wants you to, right? So in January of 2020, I sat down at the desk at home, unemployed, no check, no money. We were selling stuff out of the garage and things just to create more money, but the Lord had a plan, so we're going to stick with the plan. And I sat down, I wrote down 16 chapter titles. And I said, Lord, do you want me to write a book about this? I don't know half of these titles. I don't know enough about them to write. And so over the course of time, came back and I started to call on friends that were professionals in each one of these categories, including things that I had known from just being a pastor and life in general. So the result of that was the book. So as I started to do seminars, the first thing they would say is, this is great. Where's the workbook? I went, So I sat down, I wrote the workbook. And so what happens now when people will buy the book, they'll read the book, which is, here's the topic and the history behind it, and then the workbook, here's how to do it. See the difference? So if you just get a workbook, you're going to start doing it, but you're not going to understand necessarily why. So the two of them go together, which is why we sell them at a great discount back there. So if you want to buy books today, you can save upwards of $7 if you buy the combo set together. But that was the beginning of this journey. I had no idea that I would be doing this in my life. But this is where the Lord has me, and I got to tell you, I absolutely love it. I love it. Every week I'm doing services at Sacramento Valley National Cemetery in Dixon. In fact, I could have done 5 between last Friday and today, but I'm here in Orange County. Get back on Tuesday, and I have one scheduled for Wednesday. So I'm always doing services, especially for veterans. And it's an honor to do that with the veterans. So I want to show you something else here. There's the workbook. But I want to show you something that really struck me about a week and a half ago. Laura and I walked into a restaurant in Napa and sat down, and I come from the food and beverage industry. So I know what a table tent is. This is what it is. It sits on the table and it tells you something. So what it said when I sat down and read it is, here's the house rules. We will bus your table for you. Don't get up and move stuff around. Feel free to grab a water from the water station. It's telling you you've got the freedom to get up. Don't wait for us. Connect here in person and take calls outside. Don't be rude. Don't be having a conversation. Don't be watching a movie. Want to go surfing? Surf the network? Here's our Wi-Fi. Here's the password. Be kind to your neighbors. Please use headphones if you're going to watch a video or the news or something. And if you like dining with us, leave us a review. Want more food? No need to get up. We'll flag you down. So what's so impressive about this? Anywhere you go, anything you do, if you've got the rules or you've got some direction, you're going to make better decisions. Why? Because they're directing you towards the answers, right? Has anyone ever seen a table tent like this before? Where you sit down at a restaurant, it answered all your questions, right? You're not wondering about, do I flag somebody down for something? Oh, can I get the password to the Wi-Fi? It's very, very informative. So that leads me to this. The lens that I want you to look through today is everything that you do, starting from today forward. If you haven't already done it, start thinking about, I need to build a team of people. And here's the categories up there. You've got a team of professionals. You've got a team of legal people, medical, financial, and personal. Underneath each one of those are subtitles: insurance agents, Social Security Administration, funeral directors, an officiant for service, power of attorney, power of healthcare, trust attorney, all the different things. Why? There's two terms that you need to understand. First term is pre-need. Everyone sitting here today is pre-need. Go like this. You're sitting here, you're alive. You are pre-need. The other term is at need. There's been a death, and now you are at the point of needing help. If you walked into a funeral home today, and a funeral director is there, or secretary gets up somebody, first thing you're going to say to you, are you pre-need or at need? Why? Because it changes how they talk to you from that point forward. You're here today as pre-need, meaning that you've got every opportunity to leave your survivors a gift in your legacy. Tell you a couple stories of why it's important. Of the last 131 services I've done in the last 3.5 years, what percentage of those are people that have done all of the work and their legacy included nothing but great things for the family? What percentage? Throw out some numbers. 5%. So that's not just me. I talk to funeral directors. I talk to chaplains in cities. I talk to people. It's always about the same 5%. So here's two very different stories. One of them is a story that's very sad. One of them is a story that's very good. This one over here, I sat with the lady. She called me that day. Her husband died the day before. Met with her the following morning. And she was sitting across the table, and her son was there. And she said, "What do I do now?" And I get that all the time. I said, "What do you mean by that?" And I know what she's going to say. What do I do? Had no pre-need or no pre-planning, none. I said, "Explain that to me." She said, "Well, my husband and I have been married for 10 years. I'm in my late 60s. I have no idea if I'm on the deed to the house. I have no income. I have no idea if I get his retirement income. I have no idea about anything. I'm starting with the assumption I have nothing." The lens we look through today and everything we talk about, the more that you plan is when you pass away one day, end of life event, your survivors are going to inherit your problem, what Linda said, or they're going to inherit your gift and your love. One of the two. So the more I talked to her, she had to go out and do all this homework, and a lot of homework to find out, how does she survive the next day? Does she lose the home? Does she have an income? Does she need to go back to work? So that's one story. The other story is the mayor of Napa in the 70s passed away, and I officiated his funeral a couple years ago. He had done all of this and more. He gets the gold star. So when I sat down with the family to talk, there was never any question about, where are you? It was all these great stories about him and how he loved the family and how he expresses love by doing this and the memories that they have. So the service itself, when we talk about a celebration of life, it was a party. It was wonderful. The speakers, everything. Everybody loved this guy because he wanted his legacy to include love for his family. Did a great job. Two very different stories. And there's a whole lot in between. So as we talk about building your team, the lens we look through, let's start talking about chapter titles. So I'm going to go over each one of these. Now, some of these I'm going to go fairly quick because we only have 6 hours. So give me some time here. So you may be thinking right off the bat, well, I already have life insurance. I already have a trust. Well, let's talk about that because sometimes you think you do, but you really don't because you have no idea where the documents are, or they're not updated, or the attorney is retired. You can't find the paperwork, so you don't have a trust. So let's talk about things like life insurance. And you may think, well, I'm too old to have life insurance. I've got a whole life policy. That's great, but let me give you a different perspective on life insurance. So if you were, everybody in here, we're pretty close to the same age. So as you think about your kids or grandkids, and you say, well, I've got a 35 or 40-year-old, but my son or daughter doesn't have insurance, and I've got grandkids, here's the question for you. If one of them were to pass away, who are they going to come to for money? Us. And they're not going to come for $5,000. If they've got kids, you have grandkids, and they're still at home, and they have mortgage payments, car payments, support for the kids, and all the other, we're talking $100,000, $200,000 or $300,000 over a 5 or 10 year period. So how do you protect yourself? So in this age category, that's what we're talking about. The way you protect yourself is you say to your kids, I'm going to buy you say a $500,000 policy for each of you, and I'm going to pay for it for a couple of years at the cost of maybe $25 or $27 a month each. And you take that times 12, right? So over a 2 year period, you're putting out maybe $600 or $700. And then you say, I'm going to give this policy to you. I paid for it, but you got to pick up the premiums now because you're covered. So you're helping them support their families, and you're also supporting you in your assets because in an end-of-life event, they're going to need that kind of money. So it isn't just about make sure your kids get life insurance, it's why are they getting life insurance? To protect their family. So if you had the workbook, there's a couple of different methods in here on how you estimate how much you need. And let me give you an idea. So if you have the 28-year-old who goes out today and says, I need life insurance, I'm going to get a $500,000 policy. And after they go through all of the homework to figure out how much they really need, they say, well, $500,000. When they go through the homework, they really need $1.3 million. Great, so they go out and they get a policy for $1.25 million. But an end-of-life event doesn't happen for 15 or 18 years later. Well, this shows they really need $1.8 million. So this first page, this is why this book, the workbook, is so important. It shows you how and why. The first book shows you the history behind each chapter and why it's important. This shows you how to do it and how to estimate. So when we talk about life insurance, people sitting here, you either have a whole life policy that's good for your entire life. You probably don't have a term because term is 20 years and looking around our age that has expired, or you have a burial policy. But you got to think about your kids and grandkids and your assets. Now, if you happen to have an extra $100,000 or $200,000, $300,000, and you don't want to get them a life insurance policy for $500 or $600 for a year or two, that's okay, it's your choice. But it's a different perspective, isn't it? How do you protect you? That's why when I talk about a group like this, that's the topic. If this was a young married couple group, I'd be having a different conversation. Protect them for your kids and make sure that they are protected. So when people say to me, Rick, what's the average age of the deceased over the last 175, 200 services? Most people say 75, 80, 82. Probably about 59, 60, 61. And I'm going to share a couple of stories with you and why that's important. So let's go on to the next chapter. It is finalizing your will and your trust. I want to tell you a story about why a will and a trust is so important. So a couple years ago, I get a call from a family, and from the sister, and she said, my brother passed away. And my brother's wife has already passed away, and he's got 2 kids. I think they were 14 and 10 or 14, 11 at the time. So I officiated the service. A year and a half later, so about less than a year ago, I get a call from the sister, said, our father has now passed away. Would you do his service? I said, absolutely. So I walk in, and I see the 2 boys sitting in the background, back there. And so I walked up to the sister and I said, who are the boys living with now? She said, they've been in foster care for a year and a half. Immediately, I went, he didn't have a will, did he? She goes, no. So those boys, another 6 months, they've been in foster care for 2 years because they didn't have a $300 will. Let that sink in for a minute. So if you don't want to pre-plan, if you don't want to think ahead, that's part of your legacy. So those two boys should say, part of my dad's legacy is he didn't think about us or enough about us to spend $300 to have a will. Chances are he didn't know. Most people don't know. If I asked you right now, before I even told you that story, how many people in here knew a simple will would protect the minor children? How many people knew that? Okay, more than normal. So in a trust, the reason you want a trust is to do a couple things. Stay out of probate. Nobody ever wants to go to probate. The whole list of reasons why. You want to stay out of probate. You want to make sure that your wishes go and are executed properly. So if you have a desire for your assets to go here, 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 and when they're dispersed and all that, it's got to be done through a trust. It's very important. Now, I won't ask for hands because I already know the answer. If I were to say to you, how many people here have a trust? Some hands would go up. And then I would ask, how many of you have updated in the last 3 to 5 years? One would go up, maybe two would go up, maybe three would go up, but the majority would say, no. Here's why it's important. Your trust is related to the tax laws when that trust was written. Some tax laws, as they change yearly, are beneficial to others. If you have one from 20 years ago and that tax law was bad for you, the way that those funds are dispersed, you're going to not reap the benefit, just the opposite. So you want to make sure in every life event, whether it's a birth, a death, a relational breach, you change your mind about giving to somebody, maybe an organization, maybe the church. You need to update that because once you die, your trust is just like the stones, the 10 Commandments. It's not going to change. The other thing that most people don't realize is that when your attorney hands you this really nice packet in this trust and says, because you live in Irvine or Newport, your $5,500 or $6,500 trust versus you lived in Barstow, $2,500 trust, looks really good, but they don't tell you, here's a list of things, assets, that you now need to move under the trust and rename. Most people don't know that. So if you have a checking account with $30,000, you have a Bitcoin investment with $100,000, you've got a savings account with $50,000, you've got this over here, your house over here, and none of them have been retitled in the name of the trust. What's your first name? So the Kathy Irrevocable Trust, if all these things are listed as Kathy and Kathy's last name, but they're not listed under the Irrevocable Trust, on the day of death, they're not protected. Where do they go? Probate. I've yet to have anybody say, my attorney handed me a list of things that I need to move under the trust and rename. Is anybody who have a trust, did your attorney give you a list? Really? Wow. Good for you. I want your attorney's name. So again, the importance of a trust is to make sure that what you want done gets done. It's part of your legacy. And you want to make sure that that trust is updated every 3 to 5 years because laws change, tax laws, your individual life changes and what you want, you make decisions. So it's very important. But most importantly, if a person says, I don't have the money for a trust and I don't have assets like that, if they have minor children, a will. So I've asked regularly, should I download a trust and fill in the blanks? My answer is no. Why? Because that trust has to withstand the scrutiny of the court if it ever gets to the court. And if you download that and you don't know the legal jargon of what to do, and you make one mistake, who's responsible? You are. A will, very different. $300 download, you want to make sure that the guardianship for your minor children, this is the conversation you're having with your children for your grandchildren's protection, that they at least have a will to make sure that they're protected. You do not want your grandchildren in foster care for 2 years. So people say, well, why does it take 2 years? Might take a year, might take 3 years. Because you don't want your grandchildren living with a felon, an addict, a pedophile, something going on in that house that's going to hurt them. And the judge doesn't know them. That judge is going to spend all the time it takes to make sure that those children go the right home. Even though Linda might live 50 yards or 100 yards down the street from the grandchildren, the judge doesn't know Linda. So those children are going to live right here. It's sad. It's sad. So when I showed you the build a team, these people are part of your team. They're part of pre-need. Yeah, still alive. As part of the pre-need. So I'm impressed that so many of you already have knowledge about trust and that you have actually updated your trust, or the attorney has given you a list of things that need to be moved under. That's good. If you haven't, call your attorney and say, give me a list of everything that needs to be retitled and moved under. Now, things like the deed to the house, they're probably going to have to do that for you. And I would, because you don't want to make a mistake on it. Okay? Got a question?
I have a question. Didn't think about this yesterday until I got home. When my mom died, she had put our names, she had put our names on stock along with hers, so that when she died, it would just basically split everything. Is that a good thing to do?
I'm going to take the easy way out. I don't know. Because anything I say to you at all, if I'm wrong, I'm going to feel horrible. So anything that becomes legal, I would call your attorney or your CPA. Yeah. That's my next topic right here. So in California, one of the few states that if you have a fiduciary advisor, California is one of the few states where they have to have a resume this long in order to qualify. If you go to another state that doesn't have any regulation, they might be a high school graduate, they might be a college graduate, but they can hang a shingle and they can manage your money for you. California, in the flyers that I have out on the desk out there for the fiduciary advisor, she's licensed in California, she can operate anywhere. Those things are only out there to show you you should be looking for these things in your area. So if you said, well, I'll call Jeanette as a fiduciary, I would say find one in the area that you're close to that you can sit down and talk to, or somebody close. It's the same thing with the anatomical gift out there. If you wanted to donate your body because you cannot afford to have a funeral or any cost whatsoever, period, well, that's only out of the Bay Area. It doesn't qualify here. But there's somebody here who can do that. So everything out there is just teaching material, but you're welcome to call those people. So why fiduciary advisor? When I sit down with families to have a conversation about a funeral, quite often, because 5% are healthy, and probably 50% are okay, and there's probably 50% that are just totally dysfunctional, I can sit for hours with 3 family members talking about a dog, whether the dog can come to the funeral, talk about what music, who's going to speak and what topic, where they're going to sit, what time they're going to come. In fact, in one funeral, I did 3 funerals for the same person at 3 different locations because the family could not get it together. So when we think about a fiduciary advisor, if you were to say, well, I want my son to be a trustee, or my daughter to be a trustee, or I want them to be co-trustees, you hear it all the time, is they get along so well until there's an end-of-life event and money's involved. And then we start seeing a different story in different people. So there are times when I would say you should talk to a fiduciary advisor. And what do? They act as your trustee. They are, in California, they are highly educated people. They have a standard that they have to work by. And for in fact, Jeanette, she's got a CPA, she has a real estate background and financial background, and has passed all the tests, but they will manage all of your assets for you. So if you've got family members who say, you know what, we don't get along, we don't talk, we haven't seen one another for years, and if you appoint this person, it's gonna be a problem. Think about avoiding the problem by having a fiduciary advisor. And then they only execute what your trust says to do. They can have somebody calling saying, I want money, I want this. It's not in the trust, sorry. This family member calls and says, but my mom used to give me $600 a month and did it for the last 10 years, where's my money? Sorry, it's not in the trust. Simple as that. They're working off of whatever you designed, that's what they work off of. So fiduciary advisor is a good option for certain people. Or it might be in a position where there is a mental capacity that's not there to function as a trustee or an executor. Why would you put that burden on that person, right? I've been the trustee of 3 different trusts. It is not easy, and I don't want to ever do it again. It's not easy, because when you get these calls and you've got to give them the hard facts, or you get challenged because you are 100% responsible with what happens on how you execute and where those funds go. You are responsible. You could get sued. You could end up in court. You could end up paying money back if you make mistakes. So I've done it. I've been a trustee, never had any problems, but I had a lot of challenges. So fiduciary advisor is a good option for certain people. So let's keep moving forward here because I know I only have another 5 hours left. So next one is signing up as an organ and life donor. What is the oldest person recorded as being a donor? Eye, tissue, or organ? What's the oldest person? 105? Yep, 93, close. And why 93? Because it's not about the age, it's about the quality of the organ. So there's a lot of misunderstandings when it comes to donation of tissue and organ and eye. And the misunderstandings are, well, if you've got a name, you're raised way up on the list. That's not true. Because if you go through the book, the first book, it gives you chronological order of events every time that there is a death and the person is registered as a donor, how that process works, and it has nothing to do with names at all. It has nothing to do with how much money you have. Has nothing to do with anything. It only has to do with how they process through quickly, and the book also gives you the length in hours of that organ's life before it is no longer viable. So that's how fast things help. So when you think about, well, Mickey Mantle got a kidney because of his name, maybe he did, I don't know. I don't know how we would. But the answer is, there's a system that they go through. So here's the other thing is that people think about it. Well, if I become an organ donor, that means I have to sign a DNR, do not resuscitate. That's not true. It's not true at all. There's no truth to that. And the other ones will say, well, if I sign up, I'm on the list forever. They're not going to save my life. If I have an emergency, they're going to let me go to get the organ. Not true. In fact, if you were to sign up, you can cancel anytime you want within minutes. How many people have been to the DMV to sign up to be an organ donor? Okay, quite a few. There's another option, and that's donate life. You do it online. It takes about a minute. You can cancel within a minute. And the other question will be is, well, the church or denomination I go to, or synagogue or whatever, I don't know if they will allow. In the first book, there's 20 different denominations and faith there, from Hindu to the Protestant to the Catholic to the Muslim, who all of them say it's a gift, do it. So that takes away that myth, right? So being an organ donor, I choose, somebody may not agree with me, I choose to believe it is a gift to somebody to give life. So one person's death, you could actually save or give life to somebody, 2, 3, or 4 different people. So the other question would come up is, well, now we're getting into theology. Sorry. Well, my body has to be intact when the Lord comes back. Show me in Scripture where it says that. He got you from dust and dirt. He created you from dust and dirt, so he can put you back together pretty easily. So that's the reason I say read that book, because if you're in one of those denominations, read it, because it has 20 different denominations identified and their doctrinal statements saying, yes, it's okay to be a donor. Do it. So I'm a donor. I will always be a donor. But that particular chapter will answer all those questions for you that you have. The next one over here is developing in hospice care. I'm a firm believer that hospice care is probably one of the most underutilized benefits that we have. And there's a lot of reasons why. Because a lot of people think, well, the moment I sign up for hospice care, then I have to sign a DNR, do not resuscitate. I'm admitting I'm going to die within a week to 2 weeks, not true. I've given up, not true. It is you making a decision how you're going to define your end of life, what that looks like. How many people in here knew that if you go on hospice, that they come in and they will actually train the family members how to care for you at some level to give them better care than they've been receiving? Anybody know that? Yeah, a couple people. So when people say, well, I'm doing my best, but I'm tired, I don't know if I'm doing it right. If they qualify for hospice, which is a doctor saying that you have a trajectory of 6 months or less of life, which isn't always true, then you qualify for hospice. So in the book, and in the workbook here, but especially in the book, it gives you 10 questions that you should be asking the hospice organizations that you interview. Why? Because they're legally responsible to give you 4 different levels of care. Some of them go way beyond that care. In Orange County, I'll guarantee you, if you called 5 different hospice organizations, some of them may have 6 or 7 or 8 different things that they offer you, and they're accredited. If you go somewhere like Barstow or a smaller town, you're going to have 1 or 2, and they're going to offer 4. And they may not do it all that well, but they have to offer the 4. The other questions that are in the book is, well, what questions do I ask them to find out what level of care they offer and how good they are? Well, are they accredited? First of all, if they are, then there's things that they have to report in order to give you, a potential client, information to make a good decision. So that's why I keep saying is in the book is here's the history and the why behind it. The workbook is the how. So if you chose to just get the book, you will create your own workbook. If you just get the workbook, you're going to say, I don't fully understand this. And I didn't do it to try and deceive to make another $2 on a book. I did it because people asked for this. And so I created it. So in the world of hospice, hospice workers are some of my favorite people, along with veterans, military veterans. What they go through every day to give care and treat people, how they mentally and emotionally process that and go home and have a normal life and go back out and work with people again. These are special, special people. I love hospice workers. They're just great people. But a lot of people, again, will say the potential client, I don't want hospice because I don't want to admit all these things. What you're really saying is, if you don't know, there are things out there that will help my family members to help me, but I'm going to choose to follow this path that just unfortunately makes it harder on everybody else. And it doesn't have to be that way. So if you're sitting here today healthy, I'm going to ask you to do something. Today, this week, whenever, go back and get on the computer and Google hospice in your area, see how many there are, and start reading about them. Start understanding more about what they do. Why? Because you're pre-need. You want to understand today, not the morning of. I'm going to do a quick story. So when my wife passed away, she had, looking for my water here, she had cancer. At the 5-year anniversary date, we had a call from the doctor and said, your cancer's back, it's metastatic, it's in the bone. She went through a stem cell transplant. Second person in the world to have a tandem stem cell transplant, 30 days in the hospital, 30 days out, 30 days back in for another one. My brother was the 18th person in this country to have a stem cell transplant, full body. So when she was, forgot where I was going there with this. Got me thinking about something else. Somebody help me, what was I talking about? Hospice. So when she went through all that, I took care of her at home. I did all that. And she qualified to have medical treatment come to the house, but I chose to do that myself because I wanted to learn, I wanted to take care of her. But as you go out and you start looking at hospice organizations and learning more about it, the pre-planning is where I was going with this, is the pre-planning, the more you know then, now I know exactly where I was. On the day that she passed away, about 3 days later, and I knew this was coming, wasn't a surprise. We had a lawn in our backyard about the size of this upper part of the stage. It took me 4 days to mow that lawn. I did one strip, stopped, mentally I was done. Came out the following day, turned around, mowed another strip, I was done. Third day, mowed another strip, I was done. Fourth day, mowed 2 strips, I was done. 4 days to mow my lawn that size. So the reason you want to pre-need, pre-plan, is because on the day of an end-of-life event, your cognitive skill level goes from here to here, which is why, and I lived 1 mile down the street from the church. I went to church one morning, going to work. I ended up in Calistoga, 26 miles away. Stopped, pulled over, looked around, and went, what am I doing in Calistoga? And then for a month or two, missing appointments, I get a call, Rick, you got an appointment sitting in your office waiting for you. No idea. I'd end up on the other side of Napa, 7 miles away. Go, what am I doing here? So part of when you think about things like hospice, you think about other things, the more that you pre-plan is on that day of, you're thinking about your survivors. Do you want to leave your survivors in that condition where there's no pre-planning and they have to pick up from the very beginning and start? Or do you want them to open up the workbook, which you've already gone through, and they start going through it and going, yep, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing. Here's what they chosen, trust is done, it's all finished. Everything is moved over. I want to keep going because there's a couple things I want to read to you. So, next chapter is 5 is preparation for sudden death. So a friend of mine in Napa is a retired fire captain. And he in the original book, he told 2 stories, along with a coroner investigator friend of mine. One of them is he got a call one day, they went to the house, and they were running up because it was the baby who had died. Mother called and said, my baby's died. They get to the front door had a hard screen door, metal, locked. Tried to open it, nothing. And she came to the door, they said, let us in, let us in, let us in. They're doing exactly what they're trained to do, right, paramedics, let us in. She goes, nope. You're not coming in until you promise not to revive my baby. They said, well, that's what we're here for, let us in, let us in. And he said, they're ready to break the door down. They've been trained to do that. Nothing will stop them. They're going to come through a wall to get to that baby. She held up the DNR and said, my baby was terminally ill. My baby has passed away. I won't let you in until you promise you will not revive her. And they looked at the DNR and they said, okay. So on her hardest day of her life, she did the smartest thing she had to do. Because if they would have revived the baby, it may have been a day or two because the baby would have passed away again. part of pre-planning. She had the DNR. Not only did she have it in her hand, not in a drawer somewhere, panicked, not being able to find it, or in her car or at somebody's house, she had it available, she was ready. So when sudden death happens, the emotions kick in. If you can pre-plan anything in advance whatsoever like she did, and she did the absolute best she could do, and she did the absolute right thing. He tells another story about a gentleman who passed away. Very similar. But the coroner investigator talks about in this particular chapter what his role is. When he shows up on scene, people have this automatic decision. Well, if the coroner's here, that means my loved one probably was murdered, or there was something suspicious, or I'm going to get a bill for thousands of dollars for this. And he tells the whole story about those are all myths. Tells the story what he does. They're there to investigate, yes. They're not there to charge you money, because most counties pick up the bill for that because they don't want you to have to pay for that. They don't. And so if you read the coroner investigator in that chapter on what they do and why they do it, it's enlightening because they record everything they find that goes in a database, which is why laws were changed over time, like baby and infant crib death. Laws have been changed and medical perspectives have been changed because of the information they gather and input into the database. So when you think about a sudden death, could be from an accident, could be from a heart attack, could be from whatever. If you have nothing in the way of pre-planning, you're starting from square one and you're gonna try and mow your lawn over the course of the next week. It is so hard to do without some kind of pre-planning. And I'm gonna keep saying that. Build your team and pre-plan. Pre-need, at need. Any questions on sudden death? Again, we've got about 4 more hours to go, so we're almost there. Next chapter is on stillbirth, infant loss, and miscarriage. So we're thinking here in this group, chances are none of us are going to have a new baby. None of us are going to get pregnant. God can do incredible things. So, I mean, what was the oldest of the Bible? 900 years old. So it can happen. The reason this chapter is so important is because you at your age with children and grandchildren, or be people of influence in your community or a church, when this happens, which is regular, the national average reported is 15 to 20% of pregnancies end up in stillbirth or miscarriage. And that is not an accurate number. Most people will agree it's really 30 to 35%. Why? Because there's some states not required to report numbers. So the numbers are always low. And and Kathy, you would agree, the number of women that come in and sit down to say, I've gone through this, it is off the chart. It's a big number. But why is this important to you? The 2 women that I interviewed for this particular chapter went through something that if they would have known before, if they would have, her and her husband had a conversation before, if they would have had some sort of pre-planning before, the day that they were in the hospital and they had a stillbirth, the questions that came at them, rapid fire, from the nurses, which were wonderful people, they thought they had to answer all the questions. What's the name of your baby? What's the last name of your baby? Do you want a middle name for your baby? Do you want to have a funeral? Where's it going to be? Do you want third-party disposition? Do you want the hospital to take care of your baby and have it cremated? You'll never get the ashes back. What do you want? All these questions, one right after another. Both of these ladies and their husbands were there, said, we have no idea. But they had to answer the questions on the spot. How many of those questions did they really have to answer? 0. You don't have to answer any of those questions. You can come back the following day or a couple days later to answer them. You want to talk about them. But they don't tell you that. I'm not saying the nurses were not doing their job or they weren't doing it well. They were doing exactly what they're trained to do, is capture information. Good thing is, if you have children or grandchildren, and if you want to initiate this conversation because of what's in the book and what's in here, say, have you guys ever thought about this? Because it happens 30% of the time. Have you ever thought about this? Have you ever thought about having a conversation? So in the workbook here, I've listed a couple of things in here to help lead them through a conversation about that. And in that, I really say, in that conversation, think about timing. It is not an impromptu conversation on the freeway with the radio going, drinking coffee. It is not that time. Set a time. Have a time of quietness when you can talk and reflect. Next one is give grace, because this is an extremely emotional topic. Give grace, because whatever the answer is you're hearing, let them talk. Give them grace. Care about one another enough that you would give them time to think and talk. Love one another enough that you would respect one another. And the last one is hope. Pray about it, talk about it. So if there was ever that event and you are the parent or grandparent, you become the mentor. Think about that. Chances are they look up to you. Chances are if you come along beside them and say, I love you dearly. I know something about this. Let's have a conversation. If you get a call from the hospital and they're in the hospital, say, don't answer any questions yet. Let me come and sit down and talk with you. Do you know if Orange County or Irvine is one of the cities or counties that if you have a miscarriage or stillbirth, will offer you up to 1 year of free counseling? Orange County? Okay. Napa County does. 1 year. They will give free counseling for 1 year to a therapist, 2 or 3 that are named within Napa. Did you know at a funeral home, and you raise your hand if I'm right, is certain cemeteries, most of them, have an infant section over here that if there's an infant death, that they will give the free plot or ground, right, where your baby can be buried, or a mausoleum behind a wall or somewhere at no cost. You still pay for the casket, you still pay for the processing fee, but the ground itself or the area over here is free. Why? To honor you and your baby. In the book, I cite a law out of an East Coast state, and they refer to the baby as medical waste. It's the only time in the book I talk about my faith, because the book is not about me and my faith. It's about walking people through end of life. But they reference the baby as medical waste, and they neutralize that whole emotional part to say it's okay, it's just medical waste and it's just treated this way. The baby is not medical waste. The baby is a baby for the moment of conception. And the baby needs to be treated with dignity and love and to be honored. And that's why funeral homes have, in cemeteries, a place over here. That's why we have services. That's why they ask the parents in the hospital, do you want to give your baby a first name, a last name, a middle name? What does the disposition look for? So you at your age today and experience, you are great mentors for your children or grandchildren or people that you encounter. That's why this topic, doesn't matter how old you are today, the more you know, the more you can help somebody down the road. Because if you're a Christ follower, you're a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ. You're here to minister to people in the community. You're here to be the light on the hill. You're here to make a difference. So when you take the information that you learn and you apply it into the community, you're not only helping that person, but you're helping the community. Yes?
There is a designated difference, and I think California is 20 weeks and disposition of the baby, especially that. After a certain point, they have to have a burn of some sort. So the things, so many people say to the mother, well,
So my one friend that told the story in the book, Cassie, she was new to faith. I remember the day she walked into the church in the lobby, and I was standing out there. She came in, and her and her husband, Brian. And I could tell right off the bat that this was a hard day for them. So we talked afterwards, and she told me the story that we just lost her baby. Stillbirth. They put the baby on her chest and had to spend time, or had the opportunity to spend time with her baby, and then her baby was taken and had to make all these decisions. And she said, they offered me 1 year of counseling. And she said, I wasn't ready for counseling. And ended up going later. But it was exactly what you said, the process of when are you ready for counseling, which is why they offered for 1 year, not 30 days. So part of pre-planning for you is to find out what services in your area are available so you can offer these to your family members or people that you encounter when this happens. But I think that is a great use of money by the government to offer counseling for families like that. I think it's wonderful. Chapter 8 is choosing the right funeral home. So a friend of mine, Ken, is a funeral director, and another friend of mine is Lon at Tulike in Napa. So they helped me write this chapter, and I'm at funeral homes all the time because I do funerals constantly. And so I asked Ken, I said, so Ken, when a family member comes in pre-planning, what questions should they be asking? So in the book, he lists down all the questions, what you're looking for. And same thing as the workbook, there's a checklist. What is it gonna cost? These are all the questions you wanna be asking. So like any other industry, there will be the, quote, the silver package or the bronze package. And why do they offer that? There's a 4-letter word that everybody loves here, and it's spelled S-A-L-E, sale, because they can offer something cheaper. But here's the reality of it, and it's okay because on the back here, when you read it, these are all the reasons or all the things that you have to cooperate with in order to get this special price, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the moment you start deviating from this and say, but I want to add this on, I want to add that on, and add this on, well, that changes the price of everything. But if you are pre-need versus trying to mow your lawn, if you are pre-need, you sit down and you have this conversation. What works best for you? If you are at need and you walk in and your cognitive skills are down here, you are not going to comprehend what they're telling you. You're going to make decisions that later you wish you would have maybe made a different decision. That's why pre-need, even if you don't sign a contract, all you do is go in and get information and record it. When you are at need, you open up the book and say, this is what we want. Versus square one, tell me what you have to offer. That is hard on that day. That is hard. So pre-need is the way to go because you're making decisions, gaining information in advance. So on the day of at need, you've already made those decisions and you sign the contracts and you move forward. So some people say, well, I don't know if I want to be cremated. I don't know if I want to be buried in, the casket. That's okay. At least go and learn the terminology they're using. So if you are at need, you're talking the same language versus trying from square one to understand what they're saying. So I'm gonna, yes. Come on up here. I want them to hear to make sure that I get it right too. Okay. We're going to become best friends right here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pastor. So what I was saying is, as a pre-need, it's going to lock in that price for you. And that's very beneficial, because sometimes people do it when their spouse happens to pass. And they say, gee, I'm not ready to do it, but I'm going to do it because it's a gift for my family. And then that person doesn't pass for maybe 10 more years or 15 years, and the children come in and they say, my mom has just passed, I don't know, but she has this policy. What does it do? And they say, remarkably, your mother did a great gift for you. She's locked in that price for you. It's been paid for over time, and now these are her wishes, and you can go from there. So it's very beneficial.
Pre-need. So again, who's the person that is going to make the best decisions for you about end of life? And that is you. You. Because if Linda and I are brother and sister, and your first name is? Dennis. So Dennis and Linda and I are brothers and sisters, and we have Kathy over here, and there's no pre-need, and we get down to, I want the bronze casket. I want cremation. I want burial at sea. And I say, I don't care. All I want is the money. So whoever is making the decision is stopping the arguments, because once it starts, the trustee goes, doesn't matter what you want, Linda, Dennis, doesn't matter what you want, because mom or dad has already defined what they want, and we're going to follow this. Stops a lot of the arguments right off the bat. So when we start talking about funerals and funeral homes, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Before you leave today, I'm going to ask you to make an appointment with this young lady back here and go to O'Connor's and just sit down and say, I'm brand new to this. Would you tell me what this is all about, a funeral home? What do I need to know? What planning should I be doing today? What don't I know? What are you going to ask me for in the day of at need? Collect all that information so you can start pre-planning, which will include a meeting with a funeral home of your choice. Go to Connor's right here, and I encourage you to do that. So next chapter, and I'm really passionate. Well, let's go back. Let's finish this, the funeral home. When you go to the funeral home, they're going to ask you for certain information. And in the workbook here, it has a chart in here how to figure out what it's going to cost you to have your funeral or your cremation. It's going to break it all down for you. What is it going to cost to have a reception? Do you want a reception? What's it going to cost for an urn? What is it going to cost to have professional fees, which they'll explain to you what that means. What does it all cost? So when you sit down and you start thinking about pre-need, here's what it's going to cost. Do you have the funds for that? Or are you going to leave that up to your family? And they're going to have to come together. So we have Linda, Dennis, and Kathy who says, I can afford $5,000, I can put $2,000, and I can put $4,000. Who's going to put the other $10,000 in? Hopefully the person pre-need has planned for that and is going to pay for a portion or all of their own service. These are discussions that are in your legacy so that family members don't argue or are surprised, right? You want to eliminate, as the pre-planner, all the surprises and eliminate arguments as much as you can, because they will happen. They will happen. So go to the next chapter. Well, the other thing they're going to ask you for at a funeral home is an obituary. So in here, I wrote down what the obituary formula is. How do you write an obituary? What information do you include in that obituary? And who is the best person to write your obituary? You want to have fun? Sit down and write your own obituary one day. You want to have more fun? Have somebody else who would go, what are you talking about, Kathy? Are you nuts? That's not what I want in my obituary. So this teaches you how to write your own obituary, and I would highly encourage you to do it. In fact, in the workbook here, it has the sample obituary. Now, I wrote this as a sample for my father. I changed some of the names in here and where he worked, because I didn't want all of our names in the book, but it talks about him, born in Norwich Gorge, Ontario, Canada, which is true, and that he died at 92, which is true, and that he served in the Royal Navy, which is true, and that he grew up on the farm, which is true, that my brother and I were the apple of his eyes, that we played baseball, and he loved that. He became a professional golfer when he retired from the University of California, Riverside. His service was not at Peninsula Point Church in the town of Peninsula Point, but everything else in here is true about him. Now, if he were to write that, would he want all that information in there? I don't know, because he didn't write one. I wrote one. So planning a memorial service. I do this all the time. People will come to me and they'll say, Rick, we want to have a service that includes 3 videos, 2 songs, 5 guest speakers, you. We want pictures on there. And when we put it all together and say, okay, that's 2 hours and 20 minutes. Really? Is that all? Well, this is what you wanted. So I sit down with them and I start talking about the components of a service. The components are the officiant. Now, if they want me to speak for 5 minutes, I'll do that. Then I'm an MC. If they want me to speak for 45 minutes, I'll do that. I'll be the officiant of the service. We talk about guest speakers and the importance of having different backgrounds to be a guest speaker. So Linda might be a college mate of whoever. Dennis might be a military veteran. You might be a neighbor. You might be somebody else. Here's 4 different perspectives of the person. Now, if Linda and her sister and her brother were going to speak about their sister or brother who passed away, it's going to be the same story. So the component of that is find guest speakers that are very different backgrounds and have different perspectives and limit them on their time, because I've had to pull out the hook before. This person will pull it out and go, okay, you got just about enough there. Pull that hook over and take the mic away. Because you get 20 minutes into it, people are going, come on, come on. So the components are music, videos, guest speaker, officiant. What are you going to do? And it has to flow like a really good story to capture your attention. I'm not seeing anybody asleep today yet, so that means I'm probably doing okay, but if heads were going down like they do at a service, it's not flowing well. It's got to flow well, grab your attention where somebody's going, I didn't know that about that person. I didn't know that about you. That's the quality of having 4, 3, or 2 different guest speakers from different backgrounds, right? So every service has components. Now, if you're military, it's very fast. And I'm at Sac Valley National Cemetery every week doing services, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes when we get to veterans benefits. Very different than in a funeral home. So I've done services before where they say, you know, an hour and a half, I want my videos. It's your service. Hour and a half, I want to have 5 guest speakers. It's your service. I'm just telling you, it's not going to flow well. And if you've got people that are older, I don't want to sit for 2 hours. I want to get up and move around. And once I explain that to them, typically the service that was going to be an hour and a half is now down to 45 minutes, 50 minutes, 35 minutes, hour and 5 minutes at very most. So planning a memorial service, and there's other questions that you want to ask, such as, does this place have enough parking for the people that are going to come? Are the bathrooms clean? Is the worship center clean? Do they have the right technology to have this on the screen? Can they play a video? You want to ask all those questions. That's why it's in the book here. That's why pre-planning is so important, because you don't want to be arranging a service where you're trying to mow your lawn in 4 days. Thinking ahead, what's going to work? How's it going to work? So the other thing when you think about planning a memorial service, you get a lot of opinions. You get a lot of family members. You get a lot of people that have different opinions. And again, if the deceased had pre-planned and said, this is what I want, Now it's eliminating the arguments and discussion into make this happen because here's who the players are that I picked to make it happen. It's part of the pre-planning. So part of also, you see in social media sometimes, you'll see a person in a hospital bed and a family member laying there with him or her, an arm around him and said, this is my dad or mom. They're in their final hours of death or stages of death or dying. And that's one way to communicate to people that here's what's happening. Well, I wrote a couple of letters in here. How do you respond to people when there's a death and you've got 100 or 200 people that you want to connect with, which is different than the 3 or 4 brothers and sisters or a couple of cousins. So the first one here is called the anticipated death letter. And this is, I'm already anticipating there's going to be a death, so I'm going to go ahead and write a letter now. And this one up here is, backwards. This is the return to work letter. Yeah, we'll come back to that in a minute. So the anticipated death letter is that it's with sadness that I write this letter to inform you of my father's passing. So when a death occurs and you want to get this out and you want to put something on social media, it's your call. You can put this out there informing people that I've just experienced the loss of my family. And you are welcome to take this letter and copy it or change it. You have copyright permission to do that. And I did that because sometimes when I read the letters on Facebook and other posts, I look at it and go, okay, you did your best, but you were probably trying to mow your lawn and write a letter at the same time, and it just doesn't come out well. So this is a good template for you to look at and say, okay, I think I can do this. So this is a letter for you to inform people there's been a death. Here's one, this is called the sudden death letter. So it talks about, in this case, I use an example of my wife. My wife had a heart attack and died. She did not have heart condition before then, but she's passed away. So it goes on to say, there is no service planned yet because it was sudden, but I'm going to reissue another letter to let you know when that service is going to be. But currently we're doing okay, thank you, blah, blah, blah. So this is the sudden death letter. So if you had a death and you wanted to communicate to a large number of people, there it is for you. And I've had people come back and say, you know, I've never thought about that before. Some people say, well, I want to call everybody. Great. Can you call 50 or 60 or 100 people and tell them? No, because after the first 1 or 2 calls, emotionally you're drained, you're done. So if there's a way you can have your team members calling for you, that's great. If you want to post it on social media, this makes it really, really simple. Any questions on that at all? That's a really important chapter because it's so hard when people start looking at it and saying, well, how do I communicate that to other people? Here's another letter. How many people, and I'm going to ask for a show of hands here, how many people have had a death in their family and they have had to go back to work? How many of those experiences were really good experiences when you went back to work? Mine wasn't either, and I was a pastor at a church.
I'm in healthcare, so it's like right there, emergency prevention strikes.
So here's the history of the U.S. and the history of going back to work. U.S. does not do well with death and dying. We don't. We don't teach people how to process it. We don't teach people how to greet one another when they come back. So I had a bad experience as a pastor in our church when my wife died. I had people showing up at the door at home, which is nice, very thoughtful, but say, Rick, it's okay. Give it 6 months. You'll be okay. I don't want to bother you anymore. Wow. 6 months, you must be a prophet. I had other people at church come up on a Sunday. We had 3 services. And I would go out at the beginning, get up from there. We like it when you're over here. I'd go out at first service, greet people as they're coming in. And some of the comments I got, like, oh my goodness. And then I would go out and walk the school campus because I oversaw everything, church and school, and I'd cry. I'd come back and people would leave and I would say goodbye. Next service, people coming in. I'd have some statements made that were hurtful, and then I'd go walk to school and I'd cry. Third service, same thing. They all meant well, but they didn't know what to do or what to say. So when I wrote this chapter, I thought about me going back to work and the hundreds of people that I've talked to. So I wrote this letter, and I want to have somebody read this letter, because you're going to stand right up here beside me.
Brad is going to read it.
So this letter was written for the sole purpose of, how do you reintroduce yourself back into the workplace? How do you set yourself up for success? How do you train the people to say, here's how I want you to respond to me? Brad, go ahead and read that. I love the color of your beard, too.
Yeah. My friends and colleagues, is this on? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. As you are aware, I recently suffered a loss in my life through the death of my relationship name. My grief journey could take weeks or months or more. I'm doing the best I can. Upon my return to work, it may be awkward for both you and me, so a simple welcome back would be appreciated, since lengthy conversations and explanations may be too emotional for me right now. I will discover my new normal over time, but for now I want you to know that I may have tears while at my desk or in the print room or on break, and for no apparent reason other than grieving. This is not a reflection on you, but rather part of my journey, and although difficult, it's normal and healthy. I am okay with you asking me to go to lunch or meet after work. In fact, I invite it, but at the same time, please don't be offended if I say no. Part of the grief journey is literally taking each day and hour as they come, which means today could be a good day and tomorrow not so good. There may be times when I make mistakes with my work, so I ask that you kindly point those out to me. I would rather we work together as a team rather than have my mistakes cause additional work for you and me. This too is part of the grief journey, me trying to focus and you helping when appropriate and when needed. I appreciate your understanding, and hopefully this note provides insight into where I am emotionally in the grief journey. Please join me as we understand more about this journey together. Sincerely.
You keep that if you like. Thank you, Brad. So if you were to write that letter to your employer and colleagues, do you think that letter just informed them of exactly where you are in your journey? In the book, over here, there's 2 pages of comments that you do not want to make to people when they come back to work. There's about 1.5 pages of comments you do want to make to people when they come back to work. There's a 1/2 page for employers, how they accept and receive the employee coming back to work. Things such as, Kathy, your first day back to work, and I'm your boss. And I'm going to say to you, welcome back. Welcome back. We love you. Let's talk about a plan that works for you and how we reintroduce you back to what you were doing before. Let's talk about how long that would take. You tell me what works for you. Would you like to do just half of what you're doing in the daytime for a week or so? Do you want to come back and have this meeting again next week? What works for you? Versus what I got when I came back and said, Rick, We're so glad you're back, as I've been doing what you've been doing when you're gone. Here's everything that's left to do. Welcome back. Wow. I wanted to fire that guy. So when we look at these letters, the sudden death letter, other letters, whoops, going the wrong direction. These letters are put together because they work, because I have experienced them. I've sat down with survivors and I've showed it to them and said, would this letter work for you? I've shown it to employers and said, would this work for you? And all of them come back and said, yes, we've never seen that before. So as you're mowing your lawn and you're at need and you think about going back to work, or you've got a son or a daughter or grandkids that are going back to work, help them with a letter like that to say, reintroduce yourself back into the workplace. How many states in this country have a bereavement law, not policy, law? How many states? The state of Oregon. Federal government does not have a law. Only Oregon has a law. I was contacted by a senator in California, read the books. He said, would you help me write a law for bereavement leave in California? And I said, no, I won't. Two reasons why. You want me to do it. I don't have time to do it. And number two, what you want in there is going to hurt business, so no, I'm not going to do it. But it's one state in the country, Oregon. So what does that mean for you? Everything is negotiable, everything. If your company bereavement policy says 3 days, if it's biological or immediate family, are they going to stop you from saying, but Kathy and Dennis and Linda, Kathy, and Dennis, they want to donate time to me because I only have 3 days and only 3 days in PTO, that's 6 working days. I need 3 weeks off because of blah, 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 but they want to donate time to me. Why is that good for an employer? Because on the ledger for the bean counters in here, the CPAs, when you've got all this PTO time up here, it represents dollars. They want that number down here as low as possible at all times. Why? Because if they did layoffs, they need to pay you off. If you retire, they need to pay you off. If you're terminated, they need to pay you off. They want those numbers as low as possible, so if you can donate time to lower those numbers, they're happy. The person, the survivor, is happy. Everybody's happy. That's one way to do it. If you are in pre-need and you have a family member that is ill and with a long-term or short-term diagnosis of death, you want to go to your employer then, not the morning of and call in sick and say, just had a death in the family. You want to go weeks or months in advance and say, here's what's coming up. I'm going to keep you up to date because when I do come to you, I'm going to have time off. And I want you to make sure that you have talked to this department on who's going to pick up the slack while I'm gone. And by the way, I want my 3 colleagues here, they're going to donate time to me. How do we work that out? Everything is negotiable. Did anybody know that? That's why pre-need knowledge is so good versus trying to make a decision on the spot. I keep going back while you're mowing the lawn because you don't process through that. You don't think about these things. In most cases, employers have not been approached with this before. You have a chance to change the work culture in your business by giving them a heads up and telling them what you've read in here. Can we do this? Every employer wants their culture to be better, right? So you can contribute to that by working with them and giving them ideas, or be the normal, call in sick that day and say, just had a death in the family, I need 3 days off next week. Sorry, you can't. We've got too much going on. You need to postpone that, and that happens. So this is a picture of part of Tulake Cemetery in Napa. These are one of the letters, and again, these are in the books. That's why I encourage you to buy the books and read through them. It teaches you how to do all this, how to write obituaries, the grievance letter, back to Tulake, and now we are, one more letter, and now we're going to start talking about more time. So when it comes to insurance, a lot of people will move, and in Orange County is a good example. We have friends that move from Napa to Southern Oregon, and it's a very country-like setting. And they moved up there, and he has a history of medical problems with his back. He's a retired fireman. He got injured on the job. He got up there, and he had to have neck surgery. They didn't do their homework. All of a sudden, he realized that in order to have surgery, they had to drive 5 hours north. So first, he had to go up for multiple appointments, 5 hours up, appointment, 5 hours back. Another appointment, 5 hours up, 5 hours back. Scheduled for surgery, 5 hours up, a couple days in the hospital, 5 hours back. Back for follow-up appointments, 5 hours up, 5 hours back. So what that means is, when you look at insurance, and it's so important that if you move, does your insurance provider have what you need in that given area? So important. Does your insurance provider offer what you need in that given area? If you are an HMO, say for example that you are Kaiser, and I have a friend in Napa whose son broke his arm in Napa, and there's a Kaiser facility in Napa, very small, more just a doctor's appointment and lab. So he took his son down to Vallejo, about a 25-minute drive away, and he went to Queen of the Valley in Napa rather than 25 minutes away, and he gets the bill for his son's arm, and I think it was like $18,000. He goes, "What's this for?" I said, "You went out of network. You could have driven to Kaiser in Vallejo, and it would have cost you the copay, $100. So when you start thinking about your insurance and you're going to move, does your insurance cover what you need in the area that you're moving to? You may have to change. The other thing about insurance, so we talked about when my wife passed away. She was in the hospital on Saturday morning. She got up. She was incoherent. I took her to the hospital. She passed away Monday morning at 4 in the morning. In that hospital room, I was there the entire time, along with my friend of mine, who's a fire captain for Berkeley. And I went home one time to shower and change and come back, so I was gone for about 2 hours. Never left the room. Nobody came in the room, except for a nurse. "How you doing?" When I got the bills, there was a list this long of all the people that visited the room, and I'm not saying that they did anything wrong. What I am saying is when you get that many moving parts, mistakes are made. But the bill, and the insurance company quit paying 30 days before her death, everything. So everything from 30 days to the date of death I got billed for, like $30-something thousand. And so I called the insurance company and said, "Why did you stop paying bills 30 days before?" Well, blah, blah, blah. Called the hospital and I said, "Why do you have like 18 people came in the room to check on her, and I was there the entire time, and so was my friend taking notes. Why are all these visits? Why am I being billed for it?" So I said, "You two need to talk, because if not, I'm getting an attorney." They talked. My final bill was about $2,000, which was the basic deductible. So part of pre-planning and building your team, if you had an event like that where somebody was in the hospital, mother, father, whoever, and you say, "We want to know what's going on," in the book and the workbook, what I suggest to you is record everybody that comes in as part of your team member. And if somebody comes in and says, a doctor comes in and looks around, say, "What's your name and why are you here?" "I'm doing this, I'm just checking." "Okay, list it." "Why are you here?" "I'm just here taking some blood work." "Okay, that's fine." So on the day the bills start coming in and you've got 42 different people that entered that room over a 2 or 3 day period, you can say, "But I've got 9. Where's the discrepancy here?" Again, I am not saying, and don't take it that way, that somebody is trying to reach into your pocket and take money. I'm not saying that. But when you get that many moving parts to it, there's bound to be mistakes. Paper always wins. Good paper always wins in court. So if you record information about what's going on, you're going to have an accurate record, which, believe me, chances are you want to have an accurate record. Okay? I'm not going to say any more than that, because that'll get my blood level up a little bit here. Yep. So I've only got another hour and a half, okay. So next one here is, this is my brother. My brother was a Vietnam veteran. At the end of the war, he was still in the service. He signed up for secret mission for 6 months. They flew up and walked up the Ho Chi Minh Trail through Cambodia and Laos looking for POWs. For 6 solid months, he did that. It's a long time to be walking a trail and still in combat. And it was just recently released that the U.S. government was doing that, but they were still fighting the war 6 months after the war was over. But during his stay in Pleiku, which is the northernmost base in Vietnam, he was sprayed multiple times with Agent Orange, and he passed away. He spent 10 years in his illness. Like I mentioned, he was the 18th person in this country to have a stem cell transplant. And when he passed away, he was buried at March National Cemetery in Southern California in Riverside, right beside March Air Force Base. So for all those years being down there, and I've been up, where am I? I'm in South, up north for 23 years. When I come down here, okay, it's a long drive, I'd go out and see him. So I saw him maybe 2 or 3 times in the last 23 years. So I did a service one day for a veteran at Tule in Napa, and this is the memorial wall, and there's hundreds of plaques on there. And I was looking at it, I went, wonder if I can get Rob up here. So I went to the funeral director and I said, my brother's a veteran, Army, and I don't have his DD-214 form, the release papers, but I have a picture of his marker at March National Cemetery. He goes, that's all we need. $400. He's on the wall in Napa. I see him every month.
What is the size of the plaque itself?
The size of the plaque is just about exactly that size. Yep. That'd be a little bit more than that, but it's about that size. And it's bronze. It's a very heavy plaque. It's attached to the wall. It's not going anywhere. That is an exact replica of his marker at the National Cemetery in Southern California. If you wanted to, you could change. So everything on the top, right up to the arms of God, is the standard issue for memorial plaque. On the very bottom, you could have something written in there, beloved father, or whatever you want. But when you go to a national cemetery and they give you the paperwork, you've got X number of spaces, you could write something, and that's where the liberty of what you want printed on the bottom, that's where that is. So when you go to a national cemetery, you've got a 30-minute service, period. Now, how do you, any veterans in here? Thank you, thank you, thank you. So when you go to a national cemetery, this is in honor of you. That's in honor of you. Thank you. When you go to a national cemetery, in order to have a service there, you have to be a registered veteran, and that's using your DD-214 form. So in the book, in the workbook, especially the book, it gives information as a pre-planner. If you pre-plan and you register as a veteran with your DD-214, you are now in the system, so when it comes time for burial at a national cemetery, you're in the system and your family can do that for you. Or if you don't do it, your family could still register you, but it's a lot more work. So what does the National Cemetery offer you? They offer you the ground, the plot. They offer you the marker. They offer you the shelter where the actual service is held. And they offer the honor guard, which is rifle volley, bugle, taps, and flag folding. If you are not buried in a national cemetery, but you choose to go to a private cemetery, there are times where the government will reimburse you for part of that. So, and it's a moving target. So I'm not going to give you any definitives because it's a moving target. But if you are buried at a national cemetery and you have the basics that are covered, You're still paying for the casket, you're still paying for the urn, you're still paying for whatever, but you've got the plot, the marker, the shelter, and honor guard. If you are a veteran and you decide, I don't think I want to be buried in a national cemetery, and I don't challenge that, I would say still register, because one day towards your end of life, you may change your mind. Let your family, give them a gift by having all that ready. You still don't have to, it's your choice. But do it today so that on the day of death, if you change your mind the day before, you've already done the homework to get that done. There's some key people in my life that are great honor: hospice workers, military veterans, law enforcement. Every one of them, I do a lot of law enforcement and a whole lot of military service for veterans. They need to be honored. Everything we can do to honor them, we need to honor them. So help us. Help us by registering. The story about my brother, diagnosed with Agent Orange. His body started to give out for 10 years. He had kidney transplants, he had stomach problems, came up to Napa to die with me, ended up going back to Southern California, died a couple months later. We supported him financially and his family for 10 years. Every month, everything, just sending them money to keep them going because he was on disability. Never got a thing from the government. Government never recognized Agent Orange. Tell a story in the book. A benefit counselor in Fairfield, Northern California, he had a call one day from a veteran who said, I want to know if I qualify for any kind of financial compensation. I'm a Vietnam vet, Agent Orange, and the benefit counselor said, come on in because I can help you. He said, I can't. I'm on an oxygen machine, my heart's bad, my kidneys have failed, I'm pretty close to the end of life. I'm coming to see you. And he saw him the following day. About 3 months later, 2 or 3 months later, he gets a call from the veteran, and the vet said, guess what? And the benefit counselor said, what's going on? He said, I just got a check for $500,000. Good for him. I wish it would have been 1.5 million or more. My brother got 0. We paid for his family to live.
It was only because they didn't recognize Agent Orange as being.
Yep. But here's the point of the story, is if you never register and ask for some sort of compensation for an injury or something else, you have earned that. You have earned it. Take it. You've earned it. Let them give you what you have earned. Yes. And let people like us serve you. That's one of the favorite parts of my ministry right now is doing military benefits or military funerals. I absolutely love it. I love the families and I love the veterans. In fact, I had a chance to do the highest ranking Coast Guard member of all of California about 1.5 years ago at Sac Valley National Cemetery. He was a lieutenant commander. Highest ranking Coast Guard member buried at Sac Valley National. Strong believer, wonderful family. Coast Guard came out. The entire crew from Sac Valley, all the employees there, came to that service because they wanted to honor him. So I'm going to wrap it up with one last thing here, and then I'm going to take a few questions. So the day of death, on the day of death, there is a survivor checklist. It's in your book, and it's in the workbook here. So the day of death, the following morning or that day, especially the following day, when you wake up and you go, what do I do today? I have to go mow my lawn. It's going to take me a week to mow the lawn. You open up the survivor checklist, and it says, here's what you do today, tomorrow, this week, this month, the next several months, step by step by step. The legal things, the things that emotionally that you need to work through, using your team that we showed at the very beginning, the team that you built. So when my wife died, I had a team, and I said to this lady, would you do all my banking for today, or for this point forward for the next 6 months or so? She was an employee at Umpqua Bank. Said, of these people over here, would you do this for me? My sister-in-law was post-polio, had polio at 6 weeks old. She was completely dependent upon me at that time in Napa. For 3 months, my small group from church, part of my team, serviced her in every capacity she needed for 3 months. Carol, you know Carol. They mowed her lawn, they took her to the store, they cooked for her, they cleaned for her, they did all this stuff for her, everything. Complete team effort putting it together. And all that came about because I had thought ahead and had a team, but I needed more people. I didn't realize it until I started to write the book. Then I started to register all these past experiences. So building that team. So the checklist will be the most important document that you have on the day of death, because the following day it's going to guide you through exactly what you need to do. And with that, I'm going to take any questions that you have. Anything? This is a smart crowd. Okay, then I'm going to say this to you.
I have a question regarding when you say select the best mortuary. What is the difference? I thought they all offer the same service.
Mortuary versus a funeral home. A mortuary historically tends more towards the science of death and preparation of the body. A funeral home does not. They both will do the same, but a mortuary is more geared towards the science and preparation. They're more involved in that part. Not always. O'Connor is a great, great mortuary. They're one of the few that have a wonderful showroom and all that, but when I go to a smaller town or a mortuary, sometimes it looks like it's right out of the 60s versus the funeral home down the street that's been upgraded, because they're more involved in the science as opposed to the presentation like a funeral home or a chapel. Not always. And I've been to O'Connor and I've spoken at O'Connor. It is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful facility. Highly encourage you to check out, but that's the difference. Does that make sense? Okay.
Something to consider when you're thinking about who's going to take care of your loved one after death. Who owns the mortuary? If it's family owned, then typically you're going to get a little bit better customer service. Pricing is going to be something that you have to really, really look at, because just across town you can have quite a variation. If you want a very simple cremation where you just want no frills, no bells and whistles, that's going to be very different than if you want a service and have staff there to help run the service. If you want full embalming and a casket, that's a completely different service line than simple cremation. So there's a lot to choose from. And in my humble opinion, and I don't work for a mortuary, although I did do a year internship, you want to look at who is running the place. Do they do embalming on site, or are they shipping your loved one somewhere far away and then bringing them back? Do they do the cremation either on site or close by? Are they in charge of it, or are they contracting it out? Who's going to be there to answer questions that you've forgotten about or that aren't in your workbook?
I never realized that there are places that will ship the remains somewhere else to have them cremated.
Right. In fact, for the most part, if you are having your loved one embalmed or cremated, for the most part, it's not happening where you make the arrangements, except in the case of like O'Connor Mortuary, and there's probably 4 family-owned mortuaries still left in Orange County. If you're going with another one that is owned by a corporate entity, which is not a bad thing, you can pretty much be guaranteed that your loved one will not be prepared on site. They're going to be shipped someplace to a central location where the embalming is done, or where the cremation is done, and it may or may not be directly affiliated with the funeral home. It may just be a contractor. They subcontract that out, and I always wondered, gosh, what happens in the transit, and what if it's not my loved one that comes back? So I always worried about that, although that's very, very rare. But it's a personal preference thing. Do you want to know exactly who's going to be working with your loved one's remains, or do you not care that much? And for some people, it's not really an issue.
And it's not uncommon also is that if you were to have a funeral home here, what Patty said is true, but I want my loved one buried at Forest Lawn up in LA, they're going to charge you $3 to $5 per mile to get there, and professional fees to drive you up there. So when you start doing the pre-need, which is why I said earlier, go to a funeral home and ask these questions to make sure you fully understand, because the at-need who just keeps being a woodpecker nodding like this, saying that's fine, that's fine, that's fine, and then you get surprised by the bill when it comes in, it doesn't have to be like that, because if you're pre-need, you're asking questions, you know the answer. You say, well, I want my husband or wife's casket to be flown to Pennsylvania, and they're going to do a burial there. That can be done for a fee. So don't be surprised when all of a sudden the funeral is now $40,000 or $30,000 because you didn't do the homework before. So there should be no surprises.
I just had a question about burial at Veterans Cemetery. I assume the funeral home or a mortuary prepares the body and transports it to we arranged this with my mom and dad, but that's been so many years ago, I don't even remember what we did, but my husband's a veteran, so.
That's if it's casket. If it's cremation, you're going to take the urn, you pick up the flag at the post office using the death certificate. Go to the post office, show them the death certificate, they give you the flag, you bring the flag in the urn the day of, 30 minutes before the service, they do all the paperwork, you hand them the urn and the flag, you get back in your car, they give you a lane number, lane 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which corresponds with the shelter. You drive out there, you walk in behind the military, they carry the flag when they're in, they set it up. Protocol, you follow behind them. The person receiving the flag will sit up front on the right-hand side, and they get the flag. It's clockwork, military.
Yeah, but the cremation occurs through the mortuary or
Correct.
right, okay.
Yep. Yeah, the veterans have no facilities for any processing at all, only for the service.
Yeah, any thoughts about normal donor versus like the Neptune Society? As something for the body?
There's, in the back there, I brought it, nobody here qualifies, but it's the anatomical gift program through Stanford University. If you live within 150 miles, not 151, but 150 miles or less, and you donate your body to science, they will pick your body up, they will use it for science, they will process, they will cremate, they will spread the ashes at sea for a total cost of $25 for a death certificate.
That's the Neptune Society?
That's the anatomical program through Stanford, but you don't qualify because you live here unless you died up there. But there's got to be something in Southern California. UCI. There you go. So I put that out there, not because you want to qualify for them, but to show you examples. There are things that you can do. Yeah.
My mother is a part of the 90+ survey at UCI Health. And so at the end, they will take her brain for further study, and then they'll send it to Neptune Society to be cremated.
Yeah. Yeah. Back there.
I would like to suggest that perhaps your next book, because this is very, very interesting, we address the process of a suicide. Our family suffered a devastating suicide a number of years ago. And of course, we couldn't ask questions from the family that was immediately affected from it. But we all wanted to know how to help and what to say, We didn't know anything about the coroner, when the police shows up, when the body is removed, how is the body released. And I think addressing that will be very helpful. How to notify work, how to notify former coworkers. You know, we wanted to be part of that team, but we didn't know what to do.
In the first book, a very good friend of mine, who was an elder at First Christian Church, his son took his own life. And so I have weaved his story through the entire book and how it applies to certain chapters so that it's a relatable story. It talks about grief, talks about the coroner, talks about notification. And so I did that purposely to bring his story up in key chapters to say, and now I'm going to talk more about him and how it applies to this chapter. But you're 100% right. In fact, if you look at the front cover of the book, it's endorsed by Rick Warren. Rick Warren's son took his own life. The way that I know Rick Warren is a high school friend who lives next to him or down the street is a contractor, built Saddleback Church. I attended Saddleback Church when they were in the high school when I lived in Lake Forest. Rick wrote me a really nice note, but he told my friend, he said, this really hits home because of his experience with his son, exactly what you're talking about. So I would encourage you to read the book. I'll give you my phone number and call me because I'd love to talk to you. Third book is in the hands of the editor, and that is a small group or leader's guide on how to train people to do exactly what I'm doing here with you today because Linda wanted it, I wrote it. So it was supposed to be available today. It'll be available next month on Amazon. And so when you leave today, there's a card. Sign up for it because on the website, if you go to the website and just submit, you're going to get this. This is a pre-planning worksheet. This is for you and not your survivors. I have one for survivors. So there's about, this is whoops, sorry, I keep going the wrong direction. This is the survivor checklist that we talked about. And people to notify, paperwork to collect. You're going to need all this upon a death. This is in the books, part of pre-planning. Collect it before it happens. And so this is a benefit checklist. This applies both for Napa County, Solana County. Part of it would apply for Orange County. So if you were to remove the top portion of that on the addresses and phone numbers, but everything else remains the same, this is the document that every surviving family gets from me because it walks them through everything that they're going to be confronted with and that they need to work on. It's extensive. And this is the document right here. So, Kathy, if you were to call me and say, your husband passed away, right? He did? Not yet, okay. If you were to say, my husband passed away, and say, okay, let's talk about having put together a service. But before we even meet, I'm going to email you a family questionnaire specific for a husband. And then I have a whole bunch of them specific for wife, mother, father, cousin, child, infant, colleague, coworker, all those. And so you would get that and fill it out and give it back to me. Now I have a working document that I can actually write a message on. But this is for you as you leave today. If you go to the website and just click and subscribe, you're not going to get a whole bunch of stuff from me, I promise. You're going to get this. This comes back, it's free, take it. This is for you to work on as part of your pre-planning because it's going to ask you 38 questions that if you choose not to do anything else, you give this to your survivors, they now have enough information that you can give to an officiant to say, here's everything that you would want to know about my loved one. They could start writing a message and developing a service. Okay, yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention when my wife passed away and we wanted to have her cremated, we went to the Omega Society, which was much, much cheaper than other places for cremation.
It's part of pre-planning. Yeah, you start doing some homework in
What society?
It's called the Omega Society.
Omega.
Omega.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to take you back to the very first thing one of the very first things we looked at up here was the table 10. So you go into a restaurant, you have expectations that a waiter or waitress is going to come, they're going to take my order, and they're going to pick up food and hand me a bill. So you sitting here today for 2 hours, hopefully you can relate to this table tent because you have now gained more information, and now you will have some questions to go out and start asking. But again, if you were to read the book or the workbook and use them, you're going to have more questions to ask because pre-planning is preparing a legacy to leave to your survivors. Everybody has a legacy. Everybody. It's what you choose your legacy to be is what decisions you'll start making today. And I've officiated services for people that their legacy is one of addiction and dysfunction and nothing but problems. And I've officiated legacies where people's legacy is one where it is filled with great stories and preparation so that when they pass away, their families are ready to celebrate and honor them as opposed to let the arguments and fights begin. So we'll put that one back up there. Any other questions at all? Because I could roll for another 2 or 3 hours easily. Yes, sir.
You know, when I read about this coming seminar, I assumed you were an attorney that was going to go over the 4 basic documents that everyone needs, living trust and the...
Let me get an invoice right here. I'll hand it to you like an attorney.
No, I take it you are not an attorney.
I'm a pastor.
You're a pastor.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there are attorneys that have become pastors, you know, and vice versa. So in other words, we fill this out, and does it mean that it's going to be passed to an attorney that will give us a price for drawing up these documents if we don't already have them?
If you go through the workbook, if you read the book and you go through the workbook and you start assembling all this information, the workbook is going to ask you to do certain things like that. If you don't have a trust, is to visit an attorney. If you don't have a will, visit an attorney or something. If you're a veteran and you haven't registered, go to a veterans benefit counselor and register. Other things you're just documenting. So I've had a couple questions to say, well, if I fill out the whole workbook, isn't that a legal document? And my answer is no, it's not. If you want to go to somebody like an attorney or somebody who can document that this is what you believe, and they have witnesses, that's an attorney question. This is all preparation for you to get ready for end of life so that your survivors have a better experience than what most do.
Okay, so in other words, you don't have like an attorney or attorneys that you work with?
In Napa, I have a couple of people that I will recommend, but I have no financial commitment or obligation or benefit from them at all. I don't do that because I don't want to be associated with, well, you're doing this so that person benefits. I have no gain from that whatsoever. I have nobody in Orange County that I would recommend for any of this whatsoever. I do have experience with O'Connor Funeral Home. I think they should be one that you should talk to.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
And for those of you who do have an attorney, talk to Ron.
I had an experience in creating, I found out it's important to have your home in a trust. But I found out that you really need to go to an attorney because you not only need the piece of paper of the trust, it has to be put into the trust. And so you really need an attorney to do that for you.
Yeah. Think about it this way. If you have a trust, right now Israel has the Iron Dome. Theoretically, any missiles that come in their Iron Dome, they're going to shoot those missiles down. They're protected in the Iron Dome. So I go out and have a trust developed, and over here I have the checking account, I have the deed to my house, I have a savings account, I have this account over here, and my trust is the Iron Dome over here to both keep me out of probate or keep people out of probate and protect what I want. If I don't move these under here, under the Iron Dome, and retitle them to the Richard James Craig Irrevocable Trust, they are by themselves, and upon my death, they're susceptible to go into probate. What doesn't go to probate is your 401k profit sharing, Roth IRA trust. They don't go to probate. They don't have to go under the dome. It's IRS laws. But things that are susceptible, that go to probate, you want to move them under the dome, under the trust, retitle them so they're protected, because the trust protects your assets. If you don't put them under the protection, they're on their own.
And the way you do that is by retitling that investment, like the whatever family irrevocable trust.
Right.
So you have to go to each one of those agencies, companies, whatever, and rename that account.
So I would go
you
to
don't
Wells.
That's what moving it means.
Right. For example, let's say I banked with Wells Fargo. I don't, but let's say I did. And we had a checking account with $10,000 in it, and I had a CD with $50,000 in it, and I had a savings account with $5,000. I would go to Wells Fargo and say, I just created this trust, and it's called the Richard Craig Irrevocable Trust. I need to move these things under the trust. They go, great, we're going to retitle them. It's no longer the Rick Craig checking account, it's the Richard James Craig Irrevocable Trust checking account. It is the Richard James Craig Irrevocable CD, and so on. They then legally get moved under the trust, and they're protected.
I think it's important to look at your property tax bill, because it will say on there it's in the trust. If it doesn't state that in there, it's probably not in the trust.
That's right. That's why if you have a trust made, you go to the attorney and say, I want a piece of paper right here that says everything under here needs to be moved under the trust so that you go and start doing your homework. I have not talked to anybody yet, maybe there's somebody here, you, who their attorney said, these items get moved under the trust. Go do it today. You're one of the first I've talked to. Well, I've talked to hundreds of people. Okay, there's another one back there. Yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
I'd like, and I think, I'm sure they would like, can you tell us when you're going to be doing more of these presentations so that we can bring and advise people to come and learn all of this?
So I live in Northern California. This is Debbie, our good friend. We were in small group together for 30 years ago we started. So we've been friends for a long time.
Long time.
Long time.
And I'm going to get him in a jacuzzi and some good food, and then we can get ready to fight again.
So I'm doing not this Sunday, the following Sunday, a seminar at a church in Napa. But I will be in Montana, I think the beginning of next year, for a funeral home up there that is bringing all first responders from Livingston, Montana in. That is PD, law enforcement, paramedics, fire department, hospice, hospitals, retirement homes, all that. As far as Southern California, I don't have anything on the docket, but I do want to come back. But that's why I wrote the Leader's Guide, so that Pastor Kathy will have people who, after reading the Leader's Guide, it's a 100-page leader guide, and if you've been in a small group before, you've got a leader. The guide tells them topically what to go through. Well, this is what we're going through. These are the questions to ask. Anticipate these answers. Come back with these questions. Open it up for discussion. Here's the homework you want to give. So I'm trying to replicate myself. Yep.
And for anyone who is here, sorry, this is really loud. I didn't expect that.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, nope, not tomorrow. Monday evening at 7 p.m., there will be a Train the Trainer opportunity, and that will help go through the why. Like, we've gone through this conversation, but we can dig more into that workbook and do more work. So I invite you to come, both anybody here and, I don't know which camera, anyone who is watching this online, feel free to come here in this space on Monday evening at 7 p.m.
Okay. So as you leave today, back there, Lauren's back there, my wife, the Cajun, who the Lord's blessed me with. Books are for sale. If you buy the combo, you're getting almost $7 off versus buying it on Amazon. Not making a lot of money, just trying to get this word out. All the information you pick up back there is more for Northern California, like an attorney, fiduciary advisor, and so on. They're just samples for you can see what it looks like. But there's the one yellow card that's going to ask for your name and so on, or you can pick up the little business card that has a website. If you go to the website, go to Contact Me, and you fill in your email, you're not going to be hearing from me. You're going to get this pre-planning questionnaire for you. It's going to be emailed right to you. And you'll get one email from me next month that says the Leader's Guide, the Train the Trainer, is now available on Amazon. Outside of that, you're not going to hear from me. If you want to contact me, I'll talk to anybody. Anybody.
This session is also not only being live streamed, but it's recorded, so it will be on our YouTube channel, which is University UMC Irvine. So you can go to our YouTube channel and click on that link and share it with everybody that wasn't able to be here today. So this is not the end of this. And also, in addition to what we're doing on Monday, Pastor Kathy and I intend to have some follow-up sessions. So for any of you who didn't get a chance to sign in on your way in and give us an email address, please do that on your way out. And when we do some follow-up sessions to dive a little more deeply into what Pastor Rick has given us today, then we will notify you of that in case you're interested in coming to join us for more conversation.
And because this is recorded, this is why we've insisted that everybody use a mic, because otherwise, for those who are watching it live stream or watching it later, it is silence, and then nobody knows what the question was that sought an answer.
So did everybody learn something today? Yeah. Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you. Bless you.
Thank you, Pastor Rick. And on behalf of both Hoag Faith Community Nursing and our health ministries team, we have a little bit of a thank you for you. So a little bit of Southern California Seas.
Wow.
And a little thank you card as well. I know you're not going to take the C's and scoot out of town before Monday, but we're going to go ahead and give it to you today.
These will be gone before we get home.
So also, just a quick thank you, not only to Rick and his wife for driving down here to do this today, but Pastor Kathy for hosting, a number of you who have helped, our health ministries team who has helped put this together, and other congregants. So thank you to all of you for making this happen and for being willing to be here and just start a conversation about something that's tough. Let's not let the conversation die. Let's continue to support each other. So thanks a bunch.